Hello, welcome to the Museum of American Glass at WheatonArts. My name is Kristin Qualls and I'm the Director of Exhibitions and Collections. 50 years ago, well 51 years ago now, WheatonArts opened to the public on this site. And 1 year ago, we had People, Place, Process, 50 years of glassmaking at WheatonArts, an exhibition celebrating the evolution of the last 50 years at Wheaton, ready to open to the public. Unfortunately, circumstances didn't allow as many visitors to come see the exhibition as we would have liked. So I hope you'll join me on this virtual tour. First things first, the name Wheaton. So the Wheaton family, T.C. Wheaton, founded a glass factory in 1888 down here in Millville, and then fast forward to 1970, and his grandson, Frank Wheaton Jr., founded WheatonArts, then Wheaton Village, to commemorate that history. Ever since then, we've been inviting artists to come in and use our studio and learn from that American industrial techniques to create art. We had a fellow, Lisa Cerny, who came in, and she was inspired by that story and created this beautiful urn to commemorate. Now, you're gonna have to trust me on this because I can't pull it out right now to show you, but there's portraits all the way around the urn. But the one on the front right here is T.C. Wheaton, the man we have to thank for starting to make the name Wheaton equal glass. Now that connection between the industry and the studio glass movement is something that makes WheatonArts special. Throughout our 50 years, we've been able to bring a variety of artists to work with us in our studio and combine those American industrial techniques with the more Italianate style of the studio glass movement. For example, Dan Daly, renowned American glass artist, came to the Wheaton Studios and brought with him Lino Tagliapietra from Murano, considered the world's best glass blower. We have Dan joining us from his studio in New Hampshire. Hey Dan, I know it's been since, 1989 since you guys were here to make this piece. Could you tell us a little bit about your experience?
The way that happened, as I recall, is Lino and I had made some things together in Murano and started a series that was based on on an exhibition that we saw in the Corning Museum called The Glass of the Caesars. So right around then I was asked to do a fellowship at the WheatonArts, and I think it was, well, most of those things are longer sessions. And I asked him if I could just do 2 weeks. And I also said, could Lino come with me? So it would be like both of us doing it and work on this collaborative series more. So they said, okay, and we did it. And then we had John Childs and Tom Farbanish, too, who were assisting, and maybe a couple other people at the time. So it was a group of people that Lino was not used to working with, and he really had a tough time, kind of turning that all into something that satisfied him for the quality of assistance that he was used to. And we got through that and made a lot of pieces. I can't remember how many we made altogether, but quite a few were trashed for one reason or another, which is normal. And then those eventually got worked out, through the whole process with the drawings and so on. And I don't know, it was a continuation of something we had already been doing, so it wasn't like a new experience for me that way. What was new was Lino getting used to relatively, a very different kind of studio, because the scale of things wasn't made for the kind of handwork that he was used to, and all the details throughout even the benches and the tables and the heights of things and so on was awkward and required a lot of forgiveness on his part to his normal way of doing things. But he got through it. We got all through it, and it was an interesting experience and good.
Could you tell me a little more about the process by which you and Lino were working together? Like, how did you ideate or conceive of the shapes and the colors and the design of the vessels, and then see that through implementation.
When we saw that show together, the Glass of the Caesars, something about the ancient Roman glass was really intriguing because it's so loose and kind of imperfect, where certain things didn't seem to matter to pursue, let's say, the heights of finesse or excellence that you see in some of these Murano pieces that are a kind of tour de force of skill, with a lot of flourishes and typical Venetian little details that are extras. So the crudeness and the kind of unevenness of a lot of those antique forms was intriguing, and he talked about that a lot. And I would show him a drawing, he would sketch beside it or say, what about this detail? And then he would at the bench do a version of it, and he said, I've seen it done this way, what about that? And this is the way you're supposed to do that. And so it was a combination of his experience in making these things and my interest in form and balance and creating basically formats too for the drawings that I was thinking about putting on them. So the drawings are all oriented as a kind of band that wraps around the piece throughout the series, and they're all scenic. They all are rather they're about place, and it's specifically places in Italy that I saw out the window of a train or driving in the countryside or something like that. They're rarely city scenes, although buildings are depicted. It's not, they're really kind of landscapes, the whole series.
Absolutely. The one we have here in the museum, I can definitely see, there's a bridge, and you can see some buildings, and it almost with the orange in the background, maybe almost like a sunset time period for the painting on it.
Right, and then the enameling technique was different for this series too, because I interpreted it more like a fresco or something. It's thick applications of enamel with a lot of texture by letting the enamel kind of pile up and dab it on with a brush rather than place individual dots of color on the piece that in the end came out like almost like Ben-Day dots or something like that, where your eye mixes the color because there is a distinct blue next to a distinct red next to a distinct yellow, or more subtle combinations than that would cause your eye to blend color. And with the pieces I made with lino, I just mixed them all up, and the applications were much more like a fresco, where it's the colors in the plaster, everything's all mixed in.
Yeah, you can definitely see the beautiful texture on this piece here, and it looks it's really dynamic next to the sort of acid wash of the glass. It's really a way to bring, as you said, bring some texture into what's often, people think of glass as a smooth, shiny material. And this piece is really showcasing the way you can, as you note, add some of that texture and even reference other mediums like the frescoes. For those assistants, it was, a priceless opportunity to get to work with not just Lino as a maestro of glass, but you as well, and learn from you about how to combine, sort of these two techniques or traditions of glass together to create these pieces.
I think so too, and that's one of the things I always admired about Wheaton is how open and how supportive it is, and how accepting it is of the diversity of people's reasons for being there, what they were trying to achieve. And I suppose that's the richness of it, but it's also, it's a remarkably unique thing that is being supported by Wheaton. I can't think of a parallel, really.
Great. Thank you so much, Dan, and I really hope we get to see you in person soon.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Now we have other pieces in the collection that commemorate that camaraderie, that intangible feeling that happens when you get a group of artists working together. For example, 5 a.m. Delirium, which is created when the fellowship group of Robin Campbell, Evan Snyderman, Dan Spitzer, and Pamina Traylor were working together toward the end of their fellowship in that studio, making their final pieces. And as a folly, they put together this piece with different parts made by each of them, again, to represent their time and their collaboration here together. So people are really important to Wheaton. Not only the artists we work with in the studio, but the collectors who are an important part of our community and help us preserve and share our passion in glass and contemporary glass art. For example, here's a selection of items that was donated to the museum by Gail Britton, a contemporary glass art collector. They include Thurman Statham, Fritz Dreisbach, Rich Royal, and Preston Singletary. So through Gail's generous donation, we're able to ensure that these artists are represented through our collection and can serve to inspire other artists that visit. We're also able to have donated beautiful pieces like this, which came to us by Peter and Jane Galetto. This is a suspended artifact by William Morris, a well-known American glass artist who really likes to reference our past to inspire his contemporary work. Something that makes Wheaton special is the connection between our museum and the studio, so the artists who visit us can be inspired by the past held in the museum. For example, Jocelyne Prince. Jocelyne referenced the past by looking to silvered items to develop a silver technique to use in her artwork. But why have me tell you about it when Jocelyne can? Hey Jocelyne, how you doing? How are things in Providence?
Things are pretty good, considering we're in a pandemic. I still have a job and I'm able to actually make a bit of work. So I would say those are all big pluses.
I wanted to talk to you about your piece, Silver Glass Guinness, from 2000 that you donated to us after your fellowship. Could you talk to us a little bit about the inspiration for this piece?
Definitely the coming in as a fellow at Wheaton, of course, one of the first things I did was go to the museum and definitely saw the collection of silver glass. This it has also the misnomer of mercury glass, but I was really fascinated with the double-walled quality of those vessels, and not so much in the sort of idea of having a something that would mimic silverware, but really in what kind of thinking was happening in terms of making a double wall vessel, the sort of calisthenics or problematics of doing that with glass.
So had you ever used that technique of creating a vessel with a double wall before you had come to Wheaton?
No, I had never done that before at all. And, really, I have to credit my colleague, fellow during the residency, Susanna Joker Janssen. We were the two quote unquote hot shop people during that particular residency.
Are there any fun anecdotes or interesting stories that you remember from your fellowship or from working on these silvered pieces, or how it's affected your practice moving forward?
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, it's just, I was on the 3-month residency, and it was an anecdote the whole time. One other of the 4 fellows was a person from India, Sisir, and he had developed an amazing kind of practice because of limitations. I mean, he didn't have access to a whole lot of equipment. He really didn't have access to hot glass. So we were, always doing, all kinds of crazy experiments with him, and, Susanna and I egging him on in terms of trying a variety of things in the hot shop, which were great. And he had this really interesting technique of using dry plaster, so we did a bunch of tests. So I just remember us getting into a whole lot of good trouble that way, with the material in the shop. And then there was, thinking about photos, there was another photo, and I don't know why we I guess we made it, I really can't remember, but there was a dunce cap, big cone shaped hat we made for some reason. I'm really not sure why. And I don't know what we actually did with it, but there is a photo of Susanna on a motorcycle with that hat on, and it's pretty hilarious. But I just, that's Wheaton. Like I don't know. We worked long hours. We were pretty giddy with access to the shop, and it was amazing. It was an amazing time. It makes me really realize, the residency came at a time that was super important to me in the development personally of my work, and, meeting the people I did in my cohort was, that also just expanded my view significantly. And, what's really interesting, being in the position of teaching, is I've seen my students go to Wheaton and have the same experience, have the experience where that freedom to work and have access to the shop and really experiment and really push an idea forward, without the normal constraints, and just having that support of an amazing amount of hot glass and kilns and everything available to you. Once again, I've sort of seen that replayed in several of the people I know who've gone to Wheaton as fellows, and it's notable that their work makes that leap after they've been there, just because of that time and space, and I think the really interesting energy that happens with the cohorts. I've been somebody who's returned to Wheaton several times, sometimes to work on my projects, because the shop there is really specific and more suitable, but also in terms of that specificity of the area in New Jersey and the specificity of the collection of the museum in terms of American glass, and the history of glass that's in the area, is something that I keep, along with, of course, my experience of being a fellow, but the specific information of the objects, of how you can look at some of these early production where stayed really, it's like in my Rolodex of references, some of the pieces that are at the museum, and that's something I carry with me all the time. And as you know, it's kind of resulted in another piece that in some sense, more so than the silver genus is site specific, but I think a lot about that production in that area of glass, and once again the way that your museum represents that, and it's a really once again in my mind an important collection, and one that I carry those objects around in my little Rolodex, brain Rolodex all the time.
That is great, and I'm so honored that in addition that your object, your pieces, your artwork is part of that collection, so that then, again, as you noted, your students, other audiences and artists that come through can also learn from what you've done and be inspired by your work. So I'm really pleased that you're able to talk with us today, and it's been wonderful to hear more about silver glass genus from 2000. So thank you, Jocelyne, for joining us.
Thank you, Kristin. I hope we get to see each other sometime soon.
Okay. And while we're thinking about Jocelyne, Come with me this way. Okay. Here we have one of Jocelyne's students, Aaron Pexa, who came for a fellowship in 2015. He was also inspired by the past held here at WheatonArts and in the museum, especially our mold collection of pressed molds, which he used in the making of this amazing multimedia piece, of which this is a small segment of the larger installation. It included pressed work, the multimedia work, again using original molds, and here are some of the original commercial pieces from the museum collection. So it's not just the museum collections, it's also our display space that inspires our artists. I'm sure you remember our lobby with its unique wallpaper. There are artists that have come and worked with us that were taken by the flocked nature of our wallpaper. As you can see here, Elizabeth McClure, Michael Crowder, and Heather Sutherland have all created beautiful flocked pieces inspired by that amazing wallpaper. In addition to people and place, process is also important to Wheaton's 50-year evolution as a creative sanctuary. For example, the Millville Rose, a paperweight pattern that was invented here in Millville by Ralph Barber that uses a special crimp tool to make, and that knowledge has been passed down through the years, including through our studio. Tools are important to the artists that work here. I noticed while curating the show that a number of the pieces created by fellows or other visiting artists referenced hands or tools. For example, this pair by Donald Lipsky, who was here for the Emanation Project. He noticed the beautiful collectible Durand vases in our collection and wanted to remind people that they were made by hand. So he took reproductions and violated them with these tools. One of the unique properties of glass means that you can't touch it. You have to use tools. So there's always been a dynamic relationship between the artists and this medium that have connected glassblowers of the past to glassblowers of the present. Here you can see more contemporary art pieces that either use or reference some of the historic tools that glassblowers still use. In addition to the People, Place, Process exhibit that was curated from the permanent collection of the museum, we're also able to display some current works by artists that we had invited to come celebrate our 50th with us in the studio. While COVID prevented us from doing that, today we do have two very special friends of Wheaton to tell you about their work and their experience here. Thank you so much for joining us, Sibylle Peretti and Stephen Paul Day. You're coming from your studio in New Orleans?
Yes, that's correct.
Nice, nice. You sent a couple pieces from Club SNS when you collaborate together. So I was really interested in learning a little more about your process as collaborators and how it was that you came to become collaborators.
Well, this is a perfect story for you, Kristin, because Wheaton has a big part in this this play of ours, this journey of ours as Club SNS, because way back when we had our first residency at Wheaton, it was called Wheaton Village back then,
I think it was 1991.
91.
Was our first residency.
And Sibylle and I weren't together as a couple at that point, and we were sort of tending towards that, even though we were both married at the time. So we decided to apply for the residency at Wheaton, and lo and behold, we got the residency together, and so we met up at Wheaton and continued the collaboration that we had started in Germany, doing drawings on small pieces of paper, and we did a lot of bar hopping, so we did drawings on beer decals, and we had a whole system of, she would draw a little bit and then I would draw a little. And while we were there, of course, we weren't living together as a couple, so we took over the basement of the fellows' house at Wheaton, and we decided that was going to be our joint studio. I don't know if they knew about this at the time, but so we started drawing on paper down there, and we started realizing that a lot of our work, especially during that time, had text in it as well. And Sibylle was writing in German and I was writing in English, and maybe it was a way for us to sort of communicate with each other as well, and we started a grand mural downstairs, and it was painted over the time we were there, and I think it stayed up for about 4 or 5 years.
Oh, wow.
But now the basement's been redone since then, so the mural is history. It's maybe
Yeah.
behind the walls, I don't know. But anyway, so that's when we started really understanding that our joint work together is best when it combines text and drawing imagery. And so that developed into the notes and, of course, the drawings on the napkins. As far as the imagery goes and the source of imagery, I'm going to let Sibylle talk a little bit about that.
Oh, so the idea behind these pieces is that we try to capture like something very beautiful, what somebody who maybe passes or leaves this planet to leave behind, something poetic. Sometimes it can be just a word, something what's kind of beautiful and has maybe a longer impact after this person leaves. And that was basically the idea.
Now that kind of connects to Snow Child in a bit, in the sense that that's based off a Russian fairy tale, am I correct?
Yes. Snow Child is based, I mean, I made like 3 of these life-size sculptures. They are all cast in opaque white glass, and the one right now in the museum is the last one. And the pieces are inspired by a Russian fairy tale that basically deals with fragility, but also life and the strength of life.
It's a beautiful piece. Could you talk a little bit about the imagery in The Warrior?
Well, The Warrior it's also sort of linked in an direct way to Wheaton, because when I was there early on, I was sort of attracted to the paperweight element of the factory, and I learned a lot from the workers there, especially Tony, the old Tony, who is now gone, but he taught me a lot about paperweights and how they make them, and what I also was studying historically at the same time was sulfides, especially used in France in the 19th century. I had just come from living in France, so they were pretty like, oh, how do they do this? And so we actually developed how to do the sulfides while I was at Wheaton, and this was maybe the second residency I did more of these, would be 94, I believe, or 5. And so The Warrior is a recent piece, but it's directly influenced because it's also paperweights, but used in a sculptural format. And then the sulfides become the drawing, or become the pictorial element of the sculptural piece. But I love the fact that the sulfide, I call it a soulfide, because it has the interior of it is a drawing that maybe represents the interior of the paperweights, which could also be a human sort of element.
Aside from your beautiful mural work in the basement, are there any other particular fun stories or interesting experiments you remember from your times here in the Wheaton studio? Or any that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, for me it was very fascinating to come. It was basically one of my first experiences even coming to the United States.
Oh, wow.
And especially being in Wheaton, it was very kind of magical and mysterious too. And I was very drawn to stories the workers would tell me.
Here's another continuity connection. The work I'm working on presently for an exhibition that opens in January is full of bottles, and inside of these bottles are histories and stories, mostly concerning New Orleans. But while I was in Wheaton, I was really, like Sibylle, enthralled by the history of Wheaton itself, and also the history of the sort of the folk tale around New Jersey, including the New Jersey Devil. We did a lot of work about that. But Wheaton itself was such a beautiful sort of, I don't know how to say it, the factory itself is a giant bottle when you look at it from the outside, and all these people are inside this giant bottle making artwork. So I thought, well, this is a perfect format to make these sort of historical dioramas and conserve the story of Wheaton and use T.C. Wheaton bottles at the same time. So it's a sort of a snowball effect of all these things working together to create this little vignette. And I think I did a number of them. Sibylle did also a few that I remember with stories in them in the bottles,
Yes.
like Louise. So the bottle idea started in Wheaton, and the history thing is something I've always worked on. So that just fit together perfectly.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, that's what we made in South Jersey was a lot of bottles. So
Yes.
and of course,
And they're beautiful bottles, and I believe it or not, the piece I'm working on now has 250 bottles in it,
really,
and probably 40% of the bottles are T.C. Wheaton bottles that I buy off of eBay.
that's amazing. I love it. So you see, the
So
South.
I have so much T.C. Wheaton in my new work. It's
Nice.
unbelievable.
That's amazing. I love hearing that. And of course, I work in a museum, so I love history, and all of your work is amazing, and it's constantly on display. So I really appreciate you guys taking some time out to talk with us. And again, I can't wait for COVID to be over so we can see you in person soon.
No, can we all wait?
Yeah.
Before we go, I want to show you one last piece. This is a piece by Vanessa German. She made that while she was here during the Emanation Project. There are two power figures, pieces that she makes, and she often incorporates found art or pieces that represent the place where they were made. So you can see the legs and the arms include glass pieces that were made in our studio, as well as some bottles that were extra bottles found in one of our old storage barns. These two figures were part of a larger installation titled "Love is Still the Greatest of Who and What We Are, for how the sky is a song in the shape of healing, for how not to die of sorrow, for how we need each other. I am reaching for your hand." This work by Vanessa embodies our shared belief in art as a healing force and what we can do when we work together. And together is how we make all of this happen. I'm pleased to introduce Donald Moore, our board chair, to tell us more about our supporters.
Thank you, Kristin. Really appreciate it. Welcome once again to Wheaton Arts and Cultural Center, and I hope you've enjoyed your tour. What I'd like to do is to just give you a sense of what we've done. What we've been working on for a number of years now is our donor recognition wall, which is right behind me. There's also a digital version that represents a kind of a rolling recognition of many people who've been involved along the way. Primarily, we're focused on the last 10 years. Our hope is that you will become that much more a part of what we're doing here at Wheaton. And we'd love to see your name up on that wall in the near future. And so I'd like to just thank you again for your support. Thank you very much for all you're doing for Wheaton, and invite you to become that much more involved in what we're doing. What I can tell you, get yourselves ready, because we've got a really evolving visionary process we're looking at here. What we're going to do on our campus is going to be phenomenal. And we'd like for you to become a part of it. So we'll be rolling that out soon enough for you to take a peek at and hopefully get involved. And on one point of clarity, I don't want you to go away without understanding this. Wheaton Arts and Cultural Center is now open for business. We are open. So there are people who walk across the campus, there are people who come into the museum, people who go into the stores. We want to make sure that you understand that, yes, you are invited to come and participate. What you should do is to go to WheatonArts.org to take a look and see when it is we are open, so you can plan your trip accordingly. We hope to see you here. We hope to see you soon. There is activity taking place on the campus, and we miss you. Thank you very much again for your attention. Thank you for your partnership, and thank you for supporting everything that we're about here at Wheaton.